All right. Hey, everybody. My name is Nathan Smith, and I'm the Digital Programming Coordinator here at the Central Arkansas Library System. Thank you so much for joining me today for Hello World Intro to Code. We are going to dive in and talk about the basics of writing computer code, and we're going to write, and you're going to get a chance to write your first program and your second and your third, actually, also today. This is the first of a three-part series. So if you're interested in digging a little deeper into this, then join me next week and week after, same time, same place, and we will dig into a couple other topics. The next session is going to be is called Functions and Flow Control. And we're going to talk about basically how to make your code a little bit cleaner and easier to update, which is nice. And then in the one after that, it's called that session is called Object-Oriented Code, and we're going to talk about some ways to sort of some tools that programming languages give you to kind of think through how real objects relate to each other and to sort of replicate that inside of your program. It's pretty cool. I think y'all are going to get a lot out of it. So please come and join me for those other two sessions if you haven't already signed up for them. To do so, you can head to cals.org, move your mouse over events and click on technology classes. But while you're at it, if you move your mouse over events and click find an event online, you'll find a bunch of other stuff that we're doing. We're doing a whole summer reading club this month and next month. There's going to be a lot of great stuff happening. We're doing we're doing story times, we're doing interviews, we're doing talks with authors, we're doing Twitch streams, all kinds of stuff. So don't be shy, come on in and join us for all that stuff. Okay, so let's get a couple of quick preliminary things out of the way before we dive into the meat of today's topic. The first thing I want to say is something I always say at the beginning of class, which is it's super duper important that you know that I encourage you to ask questions. When I say that, I don't just mean careful, well thought out questions where you're like, oh, he obviously wants me to ask a question. If you have a question, then speak up and let me know. And don't worry about the quality of the question or whether I'll think it's an easy one or any of that kind of stuff, or whether I'm setting it up. None of that matters. The point of a technology class is for you to learn some useful stuff about technology. If you're learning useful stuff about technology, even if it's not in my outline, even if I have to leave some stuff out of my outline in order to make sure that those questions get answered, that's a more successful class than if I am crossing every T and dotting every I of what I plan to cover, but you aren't understanding what I'm talking about, or you're distracted by little questions in the back of your mind or whatever. The class is not about me, it's about you. So I want you to feel free to ask questions and know that if at all possible, those questions will be addressed. So how do you do that? If you are here in Zoom with me and you're on a computer, what you'll want to do is head to the bottom of the screen and look for a little speech bubble where it says chat. Click on that chat button, and you should either get a little chat window, or the chat box should appear over on the right-hand side of the rest of your Zoom stuff that's happening. If you are joining me in Zoom on a mobile device, what you'll want to do is tap the middle of the screen, look for the More button in the corner, tap on chat tap on chat in the menu that pops up, and then type your question in for me. And that'll work the same way. If you are watching one of the live streams on Facebook or YouTube, then on Facebook, you can type your questions in the comments section, and I will see them there, just like you would on any other post in all of Facebook. And of course, if you're watching on YouTube, you can use the live chat, which is just to the right of me right now. So all that being said, also, if there are technical problems, please let me know about those as quickly as possible using just those same methods that I outlined a moment ago. So that way we can make sure and sort those technical difficulties out as soon as possible. Obviously, I teach technology classes. I think technology is a helpful and worthwhile thing to have in our lives. But at the same time, as with all tools, sometimes they break down. And so, so if there's a breakdown here, I just want to know as quick as possible so I can fix it and we can make sure that we use our time as best we can. So that's all the preliminary stuff. Let's go ahead and dive into the meat of this. Okay, so in order to follow along with me, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to pull up a website that I will show you. Let's see, let me turn on screen sharing here. Dun, 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 there we go. Okay, cool. So the website that we're going to, as you can see up here in my address bar, is https://trinket.io/python3, all one word. While you're getting there, and I'll just I'll leave my cursor up here so it's so that you can see if you missed that the first time. So let's talk a little bit about how we're going to be doing things in the class here. So what we're going to do, we're going to use this free online resource to write our code and to test it out. This is really handy because you don't have to install any software or anything like that. You just kind of do the thing. But you'll want to make sure that you are, so yeah, this gives us a chance to play without having to worry about installing software or any of that sort of thing. Let's see. Weird. Okay. Yeah, someone says it's blocking it. They're not seeing it in their view. Let me go ahead and drop it into the chat and comments here so that folks can follow the link. There we go. Okay, cool. Thank you for asking that. That's a good idea. Hopefully that gets you where you need to go. Okay, so the weird thing, and let me know if that sorted it out for you. So one other thing you can do to kind of prepare really quick is when it first comes up, you'll see two tabs here. I forget what the other one's called, but you got it. But you'll see a tab in here that's like it's some sort of data. You can just right click on it, or no, click on, there's like a little gear next to it, I think. Click on that and close that tab or delete it or whatever. And then this one that says main.py, you'll want to keep that, but you'll want to delete everything that's in that box. A really easy way to do that, just to make things a little faster for you potentially, is hold Control in the bottom corner of your keyboard if you're on a Windows computer, or hold Command if you're on a Mac, and then press A, the A key. Those are the keyboard shortcuts for select all. And that will, well, that'll allow you to select everything that's in the box so that you can just press delete or backspace and get rid of all of it at once. So hopefully you'll end up with something like what you're seeing here on my screen. Okay, so let's go ahead and write our first program here, and then we'll talk a little bit more about some of the ins and outs of this stuff. We're using the Python programming language today. There are a couple of reasons for that, but I really don't want to get into them quite yet until we've had a chance to dip our toes in. So we'll circle back around to that in a moment. But for now, let's go ahead and write our first program. This is exciting. Whoops, close something out here. Okay. An errant click. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to type in right here on the first line, line 1. It's actually numbered for us there. We're going to type the word print, open a set of parentheses. So you'll do Shift 9. Now you'll notice that when we put our left parenthesis there, a right parenthesis also appears to the right of our cursor. That's pretty useful because anytime you see something like a parenthesis or square brackets or curly braces, things like that, if you have a left one, you always have to have a right one too, because they are designed to sort of to put boundaries on something, on something that's in your program. So in this case, well, we'll talk about what that exactly is in a second, but just to go ahead and put that in your ear, like, anytime you have a left parenthesis, you got to have a right one. Anytime you have a square bracket, you got a left square bracket, you got to have a right one. Anytime you have a curly brace, you got to have another curly brace, and so on. Okay, so inside of my parentheses here, I've got, I'm going to hit apostrophe. And you'll notice when I do an apostrophe, I get the same kind of thing as well. In programming, a lot of times we call this kind of set of apostrophes single quotes. If you read something that's printed in places that speak more like British English, you'll notice that instead of using these kind of quotation marks like we do here in the US, they're kind of more like this. And that's basically the situation we have here. We're using these as quotation marks with a single sort of tick rather than two. And again, we'll talk probably a little bit more about that here and why that is here in a few. But for now, that's what we're doing. So inside of the single quotes, I'm going to start typing. I'm going to go hello world, just like that. Maybe I'll add an exclamation point just to make it a little more enthusiastic. Maybe not. It doesn't really matter. That's not anything to do with computer code. It's just fun. Okay, and now you've written your first computer program. So what we're going to do to run it is we're going to come up here to the top and click on this little play button right here. That will actually prompt the computer to run the code to make the program that we've written do its thing. So I'm going to click the little play button here. And we see over here on the right what it does. It just puts on the screen, or prints, as we say in writing computer code, the text "Hello World." The reason that's called print is, of course, back in the day when you were, before they had really good monitors. Most of the time, the feedback that came from the computer would actually be printed out on real paper, kind of like receipt paper sort of thing. And so in most programming languages, there's a similar setup like this. That's the print function, which basically, which nowadays, instead of printing something on paper, because that would get very slow and obviously pretty wasteful, they just print it on the screen. So we did it. You wrote your first computer program. It worked. That's fantastic. Marie over there on Facebook, good job. You're you're doing great. So we've got so basically, oh right, somebody else in the chat has done it as well. All right. So let's talk about what this is really quick, kind of what we wrote here, so that we can get a good feel for what's happening under the hood a little bit, because that's what we're doing. So we have this word print. You'll notice that Trinket highlighted print or color coded it in purple like this. The purple that it's giving me indicates that this is essentially like a special word, or what a lot of times we would call a keyword in our code. In this case, the keyword print along with the parentheses clues Python into the fact that we are that we're not just typing the word print, we actually want it to do something specific. A function is what we call it. And of course, we're going to dig into writing our own functions next week. But for now, there are a bunch of built-in functions in Python that we can take advantage of to make it do a lot of common tasks without much hassle on our part. The way I like to think of a function is kind of like a trick that Python already knows how to do. If you think of a dog, like, if you have a dog, maybe Rover knows how to sit, stay, roll over, come. And once you've got him trained well to do those things, then, then immediately when you say Rover sit, he sits, right? And so it's kind of the same thing here. If you say Python print, then as long as you give it something to print on screen, it'll do that. And it'll be pretty easy for that to happen. So we're calling this print function. We're using that inside of our code to make some text appear on the screen. Inside of our parentheses here are what are called arguments. And the argument in this case is hello world inside of these single quotes that I mentioned earlier. And the single quotes, or actually double quotes, the kind of standard quotation mark that we're more familiar with in American English, those, either sort of quotation mark tells Python this is a string of text. In other words, it's a piece of text that's just meant to be treated as text. It's just words, or, a number that's meant to be read by a human, that sort of thing. It's not anything, it doesn't have any mathematical value. And it doesn't have any, I know this is going to sound weird, but trust me, we'll talk about it later. It doesn't have any like truth value. We'll get into what I mean by that more here in a few minutes. But for now, it's just, or a string is just a bit of text that kind of all goes together as one thing. Could be a word, it could be a single letter, it could be paragraphs of text. It just depends on what you need. So that's our first program. We've written it. And now let's write our second program. So our second program here is going to be a little more interesting and allow a little more interaction from our user, the person who's going to be using the program that we wrote in a theoretical sense, since these are really fun, good starter exercises, but they're not going to be useful work tools for you from day to day or anything like that. So hypothetically, we want to give we want to allow our user to interact with our program a little bit more, so that it's a little more practical for them. And I mean, we're going to be using these programs, so it's good for us. Let's do this thing. So I am going to leave this print statement here. What I'm going to do is just go backspace, 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 backspace until I get print left parenthesis and then a single apostrophe or single quote there. And then inside of my parentheses and single quotes, I'm going to write, what's your name? But I'm going to do it in a particular way. So I've got what, and then I'm going to go backslash. So the backslash is the one that's above the enter key on a PC or the return key on a Mac, and below backspace or delete on a Mac. So I'm going to go what backslash apostrophe S. Then I'll put a space there. Your name, question mark. And then again, I do need a single quote and close parenthesis there, or a right parenthesis. So we've got what's your name, but we do have a backslash in front of the apostrophe for what's. When you look at this, you might get a sense for why I'm using the backslash here. Excuse me. What the backslash does is it serves as, someone's asking me to zoom in. That is perfectly reasonable. I would be happy to do that. Let me make that happen. It's all good. I mean, you're not getting like a super duper high resolution stream from Zoom, unfortunately. So I do not blame you. How's that? If you need it to be a little bigger, it totally can be. Okay, good. All right. Let me know again. I count that as a technical difficulty. So let me know if y'all run into any sort of technical difficulty like that as well. Okay, cool. So, we've got what's your name here inside of our single quotes and our parentheses. Of course, we always need a closing one if we have an opening one. The backslash, what it does is serves as what we call an escape key, or an escape character. The escape key is at the top left of your keyboard. It's an escape character. And what that does is tell Python, like, hey, I'm about to give you a symbol that has a special meaning in Python, but I want you to pretend that it doesn't have a special meaning in Python and treat it just like any other symbol. And so in this case, if I left the backspace or the backslash out, you'll notice this color code's black, because what's happened is I've closed out my text string by putting the second apostrophe here without the backslash as the escape character in front of it. And so now I get a red single quote here, and then I get a red parenthesis, which tells me Python thinks that this parenthesis is supposed to be inside of a second text string over here at the end of the line. So I need that backslash key basically just to tell Python, hey, I know that this would normally have some significance for you, but I promise you it doesn't. So we've got that first line there. Next, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to the end of the line here, press enter, and we're going to use a second line. Ooh, getting fancy now. So on our second line, we're going to write X, then equals input. And then we're going to open and then immediately close another set of parentheses here. So X equals input, left parenthesis, right parenthesis. So let's leave that for now and let's finish writing our program, and then we'll talk about what's happening, because it'll be nice to see it in action while we discuss it. So I'm going to hit enter one more time after this. Whoops, after this second parenthesis here. And on line number 3, I'm going to write print, open a set of parentheses. Again, put a set of single quotes in there. And I'm going to type, whoops, if I can type today, I'm going to type hi, comma, space inside of the single quotes. Make sure you have the space there. Otherwise, you'll run into a little bitty problem that's easily rectified, but it, it will be a little problem that you'll have to fix. So you might as well just do it now. Okay, so then I'm going to use the right arrow and move just to the right of the single quote, but not to the right of the right parenthesis here. And I'm going to go plus X. By the way, I'm putting spaces here between X and the equal sign and input, between the single quote here and the plus sign, and between the plus sign and the X. I'm putting those spaces there. Technically, those aren't required, but I find they make it just a lot more readable. And so I'm going to be doing that. Feel free to not do that or to forget to do that if you want to. Python is one of the reasons that that I chose Python for this little course, is that it is it's very flexible in terms of how it interacts with people. So how essentially how easy it is to write. Some programming languages are very fussy about the way that things are spaced or that sort of thing. And Python's not one of those, thankfully. So we can focus more on learning about code and less on fixing little typos. And that's lovely. Okay, so we've written this out. Let's go ahead and we've got our second program written. Let's go ahead up here to the top, click on the little play button to run the code. And we've got, and now over here on the right, we have what's your name, and we have a little blinking cursor right here. When I go to, and so now what I can do is I can type here. So I'm going to tell it, my name's Nathan. I'll press enter. And it says, hi, Nathan. So now I think you can probably kind of see what's going on here. There's, okay, good. It's double checking the stream to make sure that my face is not blocking anything that you need to see. Okay, so let's talk about how this program works. First, we have print what's your name. That's pretty obvious. All that's happening is essentially just what we did last time in the first program, where we had it print hello world. It just puts what's your name on the screen here. This line, though, is pretty interesting. So we have X equals input with these parentheses next to it. You don't need a space between these parentheses, and that might actually cause a problem if you put one there. So make sure it's just left parenthesis, then right parenthesis. So we talked about functions when we were talking about the print function. The input function is another one. The way the input function works is it prompts the user, the person who's actually using the program on the other side, to type something in. or it allows them to type something in, I should say. So when you put input with these parentheses here, that's what caused the little cursor to come up and start blinking here where I could type my name in. Once I press enter to give that input function some, well, input, then another thing is happening on this same line. What Python is doing, or actually, I guess two other things are happening on this line. What this line does is nice. It's always, yeah. Oh, yeah, that's great. That's perfect. Marie's saying here she added a plus and a exclamation point afterwards, like so. To make it a little more exciting, and that is spot on, perfect. So, so what this is doing over here, the x equals input. The input part of it is causing the little cursor to pop up so we can type stuff in. The x equals is initiating a variable, is what we call it. And that sounds like a bunch of jargon. I mean, I guess it is, but really all it is creating kind of a container, you might say, for particular pieces of information or values. So if you think about, well, I mean, where this comes from, this concept, where this concept comes from is basically the things like you know, algebra and stuff like that, where you had the, you know, if 2x equals x squared, then at least one answer to that is x equals 2, right? Because 2 times 2 is 4, and 2 squared is also 4. But you can think of it more generally, and this is kind of maybe more a productive way to think about it, is as sort of a container for a piece of information, or what we would usually call in programming world a value. So in this case, what's happening is we're creating that container. In this case, it's called X, and we're storing that value, the information that was typed in, which is a text string, pretty much just like this. We're storing that inside of this variable X, and then we're using it down here on line 3. On line 3, at least as I initially wrote it, let me take this out just to make it clear for the time being. In line 3, what you've got is we have our print statement again. And this time what we're doing is we're giving Python 2 different things to print or to display on the screen. The first one is this hi, comma, space. So that text string, of course, is going to result in hi, comma, space appearing over here. But then we have this plus sign right here. And what the plus sign does is, here's your big $5 computer science word for today. The plus sign tells Python to concatenate. And all that means is taking a piece of text and putting some other text next to it. That's literally all that is. When folks in code talk about this sort of thing, though, what they say is concatenate. That's what you're doing here. You are concatenating 2 different, in this case, 2 different pieces of text. So the other text that's going next to hi, comma, space is whatever the user typed in back here on line 2, the input. So when you do this, it results in hi, comma, space, and then Nathan, or whatever the user typed in to their running copy of the program. So this is really, really powerful, the whole notion of the variable, because variables can be used to store a bunch of different types of things. We've already seen text strings. It can be used to store numbers. It can be used to store pieces of data, even pieces of data that are connected to each other in what we call a list, which we'll talk about, or excuse me, not a list. That one's something different. We'll talk about in a future session the how to essentially put together a little dictionary with different values that correspond to each other. And that can be really, really powerful. So that's what, so that's a variable, and we'll have plenty of chances to work with this. Variables are one of, well, like almost all of the stuff that we're talking about today, variables are one of the most sort of core values or core principles in writing code. So we've done all of that. Let's go ahead and move on to our third example here. So our third example is one we're going to stick with. We're going to keep working on this example as we move forward and kind of make it into a kind of a where we're gonna build on this. If you if you want to get all Silicon Valley about it, we're going to iterate on this third program quite a bit. I'm not crazy about some of that tech biz jargon, but Lord knows I know it. So I will relay it reluctantly in any case. So let's write our first version of this program. This is going to add some really useful stuff to our knowledge and allow us to make things a lot more flexible and interesting and helpful to our user, hopefully, because of course that's the whole point of a computer program, is like it does something, right? So let's go ahead and I'm just going to delete all of this for now, and we'll just start with a blank slate and move into move forward from there. So here we are. We've got our what we're going to do is we're going to create a program. Oh, someone says, how did you remove that so quickly? So here's what I did. Let me actually undo that. Okay, so I'm going to take my mouse, hold down on the mouse button. And while I'm holding down on the mouse button, I'm going to move the mouse pointer up so that I have all of this selected. And then once I've got it all highlighted like this, I'm going to let go of the mouse button. And then I just press delete or backspace on my keyboard. Boom, just like that. You can also do it with the shift key. If you're down here, you hold shift on your keyboard and use the arrow keys to move the little blinking cursor around until you get it to where you want to be. And then again, just press delete or backspace. Yeah. Always a useful tool to have in your toolbox. You're very welcome. Absolutely. So for our first line here, let's go print and open a set of parentheses, open a set of single quotes, just like we did before. And inside of this, we're going to ask the user, are you hungry? Question mark. All right. Honey lemon ginseng tea. Next, what we want on line 2 here, we're going to write another statement that creates a variable like we did with the x equals input. In fact, it's honestly a very similar line here. So we're going to go yn space equals sign input. And we'll open parentheses and close parentheses. One quick thing to mention about this, the naming of the variables. So I named the first variable in the last program X. This one I've named YN, which is short for yes and no. But you can name them almost anything you want. In Python, I believe the rules are something like you can, let's see. Oh yeah, I have it written down in my notes. Yay. Okay. So it has the name of a variable has to start with either a letter or the underscore character, which is that little one right there. So it has to start with a letter or the underscore character. So that means it can't start with a number. And the name of a variable can only be either alphanumeric characters, which just means either a letter or a number, and underscores, like I just showed you. It's very, very important to note, though, that they are case sensitive, which basically just means capitalization matters. So if you have a variable called yn, that's different from a variable called yn, which is different from a variable called yn, like that. That's important to bear in mind because one, it can actually be really useful as long as you don't get things mixed up. But two, it can also cause problems in terms of it can also create bugs sometimes in your code if you're not careful about the capitalization with those sorts of things. Things like capitalization and punctuation in general in coding matter quite a bit. I find the vast majority of the time when I make a mistake, and you will make mistakes, and it's fine. Like that happens to everyone. So I can't emphasize enough how important it is to be okay with making mistakes when you're writing code. If you're like, I have to get it perfect, nobody who actually writes code for a living gets it perfect. Sometimes they do with just a stroke of luck, but generally speaking, they don't, and they have to go back and fix their problems. Like the vast majority of the time when I update an app on my phone or a program on my computer, one of the things that they describe in the, what does this update do is like bug fixes. So bugs, little glitches in the way that a program works are completely normal and expected. We're all human and we all make mistakes. So, just, give yourself a lot of leeway to make mistakes when you're writing code. Don't beat yourself up about it. It's normal. Okay, so in the chat, Debbie says, so the variable must start with a letter, but can be followed by a number. It must start with either a letter or the underscore character, this thing. And then that can then be followed by a number, whatever you've got. Absolutely. Thank you. Good clarifying question. So we've got our line here. We're creating this variable yn, and then we're prompting the user for input, and then whatever they type in and then press enter, we're going to store that input, the information that they gave us, as the variable yn, or inside the variable yn, depending on how you want to think about it. Okay, so let's move to line 3. Line 3 is going to be the word if, which is very important. And then we're going to refer back to our variable there, yn. After that, we've got a double equal sign, not just an equal sign, but a double equal sign, equal sign, equal sign. And then and then some single quotes, and inside of our single quotes is yes. Finally, outside of the single quotes, so I'm going to hit the right arrow key to move outside the single quotes, and I'm going to put a colon there. Not a semicolon like this, regular old colon, so you'll have to hold shift to get that. And we'll talk about this in conjunction with the next line that I'm going to show you. So let's move to that next line really quick and type that out as well. Okay. So on line number 4, first of all, when I hit enter, you'll notice that it's indented here now. That's intentional for reasons that will become clear in a moment. But just know that that indentation is there on purpose, and it does need to be there. We'll talk about why here in a sec. But on this indented 4th line, I'm going to type print, open a set of parentheses, open a set of single quotes, and then I'm going to type, let's see, lunchtime will be here before you know it. Maybe some of y'all have already had lunch. And then that's line 4. I'll go to the end of line 4 and hit enter. And it's going to give me another indented line, but I'm actually going to hit backspace here. So let's talk about lines 3 and 4 here really quick, and then we'll move, and then we'll add our next couple of lines here. Okay, so if our variable yn, double equal sign, and then yes as a text string here inside of those single quotes, and then a colon. So what this is, well, this is an if statement is what we call it. Basically, the way that an if statement works is you put the word if, then you give Python something to check on, essentially, some test to do, more or less. So what we're telling it here, this is the test that we want it to the thing that we want it to check. So what it's checking is whether or not the variable yn is equal to yes. Now, the reason we have 2 equal signs here is because the single equal sign in Python is, sorry about that, is something different. The single equal sign is assigning a value to a variable. So in this case, we're assigning whatever the input was from the user to that variable yn. The double equal sign is comparison. So the double equal sign says is equal to. So what you would read this as is if yn is equal to yes. The colon is there to tell Python what to do if that turns out to be the case. So the colon says, okay, if yn is equal to yes, then here are your instructions. And the instructions that it gets in this case are print, lunchtime will be here before you know it. And actually, this version of the program works just fine by itself. We're going to add more before we actually run it. But if this were a more complex program, we might try to run just this very, very simple version and check to see, well, yeah, let's do it. I'll hit the play button right here. It says, are you hungry? If I type yes and press enter, lunchtime will be here before you know it. Beautiful. It's working. But of course, I'll do it again. If it asks me, are you hungry? If I say no, nothing happens and the program ends. So that's not ideal because we only have one possible answer that our user can give. And we don't know whether they're hungry or not. So, so we want to add some additional functionality to this. What's happening here is, so we type this in. When the user types, or if the user types yes, that's stored in this variable yn, or if they type no, or if they type something else entirely, then down here we check to see whether yes was what they typed, essentially. If it was, then we do print lunchtime will be here before you know it. If it wasn't what they typed, then in this case, because we have an if statement but nothing else after it, other than the instructions, if it's yes, then Python just says, okay, well, it's not yes, and it just skips over this line here, line 4 altogether. This kind of thing is really powerful. This is what we call flow control, which we'll talk about a little bit more in next week's session. But it gives us the ability to have our program account for different types of scenarios and behave accordingly. So rather than just following the program linearly, line 1, line 2, line 3, line 4, line 5, it still kind of does that. But if we hit line 3 and the user didn't type in yes, then we're skipping line 4. So already we're seeing where we can kind of branch off and do different things. So let's branch off a little more. Okay, down here on line 5, again, I don't want this indented. So I already pressed backspace to get rid of the indentation on line 5. But if you didn't, go ahead and do that. And so underneath this, we've got, let's go ahead and put our, underneath this, we're going to add another option here. Else. So I'm going to type the word else, put a space here, or excuse me, not a space, and then put a colon, and then press enter again. So if and else are a very common pair. Basically, if gives you the ability to set up a piece of code that will run, when a particular condition is true. When in this case, the user typed in yes, and that's stored in that YN variable. The else statement gives you the ability to say, if that's not true, what happens then? So let's go, print, open my set of parentheses, open a set of single quotes, and we'll say good. Now I'm going to have to put the backslash here. \S so that we get an it's with that escape character like I talked about back in program number 2. It's probably easier to write code when you're not, hungry. Okay, cool. So I forgot my escape character that time. Again, just for anybody who's tuning in a little late or those who might have forgotten, I have the apostrophe here. The apostrophe or single quote normally in Python signals the beginning or the end of this string of text, this bit of text that Python is just treating as words or, something to be read by a human, basically. And so when I put the apostrophe here to properly punctuate the word your, I run into, it closes that text string when I don't want it to. And so I'm going to put the backslash character in front of it. Backslash is above the enter or return key and below the backspace. I'm going to put the backslash in front of it. And that tells Python, just treat it as a regular old apostrophe, not any kind of special symbol. And then I do need another apostrophe right here at the end. Whoops. There we go. Okay. So now we've got it. Make sure that all of this is red, except the backslashes are purple. And then maybe those apostrophes are too. It's really kind of hard to tell. And then make sure that your parenthesis here is black. Okay, cool. So let's try it again. I'll hit the little play button. It says, are you hungry? I'm going to say yes. Let's make sure that part still works. Lunchtime will be here before you know it. Great. Hit it again. Are you hungry? No. Good. It's probably easier to write code when you're not hungry. Great. Okay. But what if I do this? I'll hit the button to run it again. Are you hungry? Meh. Good. It's probably easier to write code when you're not hungry. Okay. So Someone's having trouble getting the parentheses or that last parenthesis to be black. Okay, so you should have 2 backslashes in here, assuming you use both the contractions that I did. Okay, good. All right, you spotted it. Great. That's awesome. That's called a bug fix right there. Excellent. So I typed meh to answer the "Are you hungry?" and it says, "Good. It's probably easier to write code when you're not hungry." And so that's not great, honestly, because it's giving me the same answer as if I type no. Literally anything I put in here, like 3.2, it'll give me the same thing. So that's not great. We need to expand this a little bit further. Okay, here's how we can make that happen. Really, what we want with this else statement here, we don't need this to be else because this is not the response. This is a response for no, really. If you're not hungry, then we say, good, it's probably easier to write code when you're not hungry. What we actually want is we want to check whether the answer is no. And if it is, give them this answer. So I'm going to go up here where it says else, and I'm going to just leave an EL and end the word differently. I'm going to make it elif, which, as you might imagine, is a combination of else and if, elif, like so. And then I'm going to add another statement, another test for Python to check. yn double equal sign, and then in single quotes, no. For some reason, it didn't add the other apostrophe there, so go figure. So basically, we've got almost the same construction as up here on line 3. elif, yn, double equal sign, no. And like I said, else and elif is else and if put together. The way this works is the if statement runs and it checks to see, okay, lunchtime, it's not, if it checks the thing and yn is not equal to yes, then what's going to happen is it's going to skip over this line. If we don't have anything down here, or if we have another if statement, then we haven't, basically it'll go back and kind of do a similar type of thing. This kind of connects the two together, which is going to be important on the next line. But it gives us another thing to check for. So we've already checked to see whether it's yes, it's not yes. So let's check to see whether it's no. And if it is, then we have another option here. Good, it's probably easier to write code when you're not hungry. I'm going to go to the end of that line, and then I'll press enter. And again, it's going to give me an indented line, but I don't want that again for line 7 here. I'll hit backspace one more time. And then I'm going to type in, I'm going to put the else down here. So else, colon, and then one more line. My kettle is shutting off in the background there. Hopefully that wasn't too loud. So I've got I've got else, I've got a colon, and now on this last indented line, what I'm going to do is go print, open my apostrophes, open my single quotes, and say, you didn't, whoops, again, backslash apostrophe, you didn't. Yeah. I had to look at that for a moment to make sure it was right. Answer my question. Make sure I close my single quotes there so that I get, so that the parenthesis is black on the end. And there it is. If, elif, else. So well, that's the other thing. If I don't have this all connected together, where it checks for yes, it checks for no, and then it does the else, then what's going to actually happen is if I have this as if, it will basically run, or it will do two things if I type yes. The first one is, and it might help to put a little line of space here so we can see this more clearly. It'll check to see whether it's yes. If it is yes, it'll print lunchtime will be here before you know it. But then if I get this second if here, it'll check for no. It won't print no because we already know that it's yes. But then it will go down to the else and say, well, it wasn't no. So we'll get both lunchtime will be here before you know it, and you didn't really answer my question. By making it elif, then we can say check for yes, then check for no. And then if it's not either yes or no, then print, you didn't really answer my question. I'll remove that extra line there to to symbolize bringing these back together. Although you could put a blank line in between those. In fact, I will go ahead and put another blank line here just for readability. Like so. You can have as many blank lines as you want in your code. It's totally cool. Programming languages care where you end a line. At least a lot of them do. But they don't care. If there's a blank line, they will just skip over it. And it doesn't really matter. So it really helps to make, to add some blank lines in there, some white space to make things more readable. Because when you come back the next day, if you've just got a wall of code this long, then your eyes might kind of glaze over. But you can kind of put your code in paragraphs. That really helps, certainly for me as someone who, is used to writing in English. Putting it in paragraphs sort of helps to make you able to make more sense of your code as you move along. So let's try it out. I'm going to hit the little play button again. Are you hungry? Let's test the yes. Lunchtime will be here before you know it. Good, good. Try it again. Are you hungry? No. Good. It's probably easier to write code when you're not hungry. Are you hungry? You didn't really answer my question. Great. Okay, it's working. So we've got our we have our answer here. For all three different cases. There are a few things that we can tweak about this. So there's a let's see. Let me. Okay, good. So let's try. Well, okay. Let me show you how to make this, or let me show you one bug that we have in our code that we can fix here. So I'm going to hit the little play button again. Ask me, are you hungry? I'm going to say yes, but I'm going to capitalize it. You didn't really answer my question. That's a problem. And this goes back to what I mentioned before about things like the variable names being case sensitive. Your computer, in a very, very real way, your computer sees a capital Y and a lowercase y as not at all the same thing. The reason that that's the case, it basically comes down to your, I don't know. Let's not get too deep into that. But really at a very fundamental level, your computer sees a capital Y and a lowercase y as completely different things. But obviously humans don't see those as completely different things. And so there's some functionality built into Python that will allow us to kind of to make it a little more forgiving in that respect. So let's make that happen. What I'm going to do is come over here and I'm going to add a couple of very small tweaks to this to make it work. Okay. If yn is equal to yes, what I'm going to do is change I'm going to come right here next to y in. I'm going to add a period after that, right after it. And then I'm going to type the word lower, open a set of parentheses, and close a set of parentheses, just like this. If y in dot lower is equal to yes. And I'm going to do the same thing down here next to the elif statement. Y in dot lower, open a set of parentheses, close a set of parentheses. So here's what's happening. We're gonna just to do a little foreshadowing here. This lower is what we call a method. And methods are something that we'll talk about in the object-oriented code session number 3 in a couple weeks. But really what they are is their functions, very similar to the print function here or the input function, stuff like that. And they're functions that are changing temporarily the value that's stored with this y in value. So the lower function, what it does is say, whatever text we have here, take it and make it all lowercase. So capital Y becomes lowercase y, capital E becomes lowercase e, and so on. And the only, but it doesn't actually change the ultimate value of this. If I were to show the value of y in down here somewhere further down in the code, then it would still, if I gave it yes in all caps, it would still show that if I printed that value later on. But this will temporarily change what's stored in that variable y in for the purpose of this comparison. So if I hit the play button right here, are you hungry? Yes. Lunchtime will be here before you know it. Hooray. Yes. Yes. Whoop. Yes. Cool. So that's working. So now my users can capitalize however they want. You could do other things and have to look at my notes. Next week's session is one that I haven't done in a while. So we may actually come back to this or some similar example and actually make this even a little more flexible so that, because, if I type in, I can capitalize yes any way I want here. But if I said yes, then it still counts as you didn't really answer my question, because it's looking at, even though over here with the lower, it's made it all lowercase, it's still looking at yes, not punctuated, and comparing it to yes with an exclamation point after it. So, so that, that's how that works. For now, we're going to leave this. We're going to leave this portion of it as it is. But let's go ahead and add some additional flow control here, because one of the things that we've got, one of the problems that we could run into would be that someone means, particularly with that limitation that I just acknowledged there, one of the problems we could run into is if the user types in yes, exclamation point, it gives us this, you didn't really answer my question, or if they type something else that's kind of not really an answer as far as the computer is concerned. In other words, something that's other than yes or no. So one way that we can add some sort of guardrails for this for our user is we can add what's called a loop. And this is a really, really useful way to make this work. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to come up here to the top, and I'm going to actually, I'm going to put my cursor right next to where it says print, and I'm going to hit the enter a couple of times so that I get some white space up here, just to make it easier to see what I'm about to do. Up here at the very top in the new line 1, I'm going to write counter equal sign 1, just like that. So counter equal sign 1. And you might have guessed what I'm doing here. I am creating a variable, and this time the variable is called 1, and is counter, and it has a value of 1. Rather than asking the user for input and storing that in the variable like I did down here, instead what I'm doing here is I'm hard coding the variable, is what we say. In other words, inside of the code, I'm giving it the value of this variable up front, where the user can't see it and shouldn't need to care about it, basically. So the user, if I'm doing my job properly, will never know that this counter variable exists and will basically never interact with it in any meaningful way. But it's going to make the program work a lot better for them once I make the other changes that I need to make here. Okay, so I've got counter equals 1. Then what I'm going to do is come down here. I'm actually going to add another line to separate this out a little bit more. And I'm going to say while, W-H-I-L-E, counter is less than 4, colon. So just to make sure this is clear, so the word while, space here, counter, the name of the variable that I used up here, is less than. So the less than sign is the one that kind of looks like an arrow pointing to the left. While counter is less than 4, and then a colon after that. So we've started the counter at 1, and we're going less than 4. Okay, so underneath that, our print statement needs to be indented because because the loop, which is called a while loop. We'll talk about the details of that here in a sec, but I want to go ahead and set it up so we can look at it before we talk about it. The loop is going to contain all of this stuff that's down here in the rest of the program. So I need to actually indent every line that has text on it a little bit more. So I'm going to use the tab key on the left-hand side of my keyboard to indent where it says print here, tab. I'm going to come down here next to YN, hit tab again to indent that. I don't need to indent this line because it has nothing on it. I'll hit the tab key to indent this if statement on line 7. And then down here where I have lunchtime will be here before you know it, that one needs to be double indented because it's inside of the while loop, and it's also inside of the if statement here on line 7. Okay, I'm going to indent the elif line, and I'm going to make sure that it's probably easier to write code when you're not hungry line is double indented. I'm going to indent the else line, and I'm going to make sure you didn't really answer my question is double indented. So it should look, I mean, these lines should look basically the same, but just scooted over a touch. So we've got, so we've almost got our loop here. I'm going to give everybody, a few seconds more to do the rest of the indentation, and just double check it because this is sometimes where, where typos can creep in. And again, if that happens to you, don't feel bad about it at all. Absolutely not. But I am going to give you a little extra time so that way you've got it all in place, hopefully. And if not, no big deal. Easy to fix. Cool. Okay, great. If you're still indenting, that's totally fine. Just keep going and it'll be all good. Okay, so we need to do a couple more things, or four more things exactly to fill out this loop and make it work properly. And then we'll talk about how it works. So I'm going to come over here and I'll click at the end of line 8. Lunchtime will be here before you know it. Hit enter. And again, or when I hit enter, this time it's double indented, just like the line above it. Great. That's exactly what I want. And I'm just going to type here the word break. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing down on line 11. Good. It's probably easier to write code when you're not hungry. I'll hit enter. And again, double indented underneath that, break. And finally, oh, why are you doing this to me? There we go. Okay, cool. Underneath that, we have our else statement, and then you didn't really answer my question. What I'm going to do at the end of this line is I'll hit enter, and I'll go, and then I'm going to do counter equals counter plus 1. And then finally, on this last line underneath counter equals counter plus 1, and you didn't really answer my question, I'm going to put continue. Okay, so here's what this does. All of this, again, as I mentioned, is inside of this while loop. And a loop, as you might imagine from the name, is designed to run a block of text over and over again. At least potentially it does. The way a while loop works is the loop functions as long as this particular criterion, I should say, is met. As long as this is true, the loop will run. Counter is less than 4. So starting out, obviously, it's obvious. Counter equals 1. So that's the value for 1. When we come down here and start the while loop, counter is definitely less than 1 or less than 4 because it's 1, obviously. And then we get, all of this code runs kind of like we had before. When we get to our if statement, it checks to see whether the user typed in yes. If they did, we print lunchtime will be here before you know it. And then we hit this break keyword here. Break is pretty much what it sounds like. What it does is it breaks the loop. It breaks the cycle so that Python will continue running the program. Will continue running what's in the program outside of the loop. Or in our case, because it's the because we don't have anything else we need to do with this program, it will end the program because basically Python will go and look and see, oh, okay, line 16 is still inside the loop, and that's where the program ends. So we're done. Same deal here with the elif statement. If the user types in no, then we print good. It's probably easier to write code when you're not hungry. Break. The loop ends, and so does the program. Here on the else statement, though, it's different. We have print, you didn't really answer my question. And then we have counter equals counter plus 1. So what that's doing is we're setting the value of counter again, just like we did up here at the top on line 1. But instead of setting it to a particular value like we did up here, what we're doing is saying, let's take the existing value of counter and let's just add 1 to it. So if this is our first time through the loop, then we get to this line, and the new value of counter, the original value of counter is 1. So we're taking that, we're adding 1 to it, and so the new value of counter is 2. Then we hit this continue line, and we loop back up to the top of the loop. Depending on how you write your loop, you might or might not need these break and continue keywords necessarily, but I find it makes it a little more clear what's happening inside of the loop when we add those. So I'm putting them there. It's not going to hurt anything, even if it's not required. So what this does is gives our user a kind of a little additional set of guardrails. You know, we as the programmer and they as the user are human, and we all make mistakes. And so if they intended to type yes, but instead they typed, you know, yet or something like that, then it'll give them, you didn't really answer my question. And then it will ask again, you know, and then it'll do this stuff and start the loop over again and ask, are you hungry? And then they have the chance to do another input here. If they answer yes or no, then it'll give them the appropriate answer and it'll end the program. If they answer something that's not yes or no again, then again, it will say, you didn't really answer my question. We'll add 1 to the counter. And now the counter's up to 3. So we continue, we go up to the top of the loop, and sure enough, that's still less than 4. So we try one more time. Are you hungry? If they put in yes or no, we give them the appropriate answer. If they put in else, or if they put in something else, then again, we say, you didn't really answer my question. We add 1 more to counter, which makes the value of counter 4. We hit the continue, and then we go up to the top to check to see whether the loop can still run. And this time, counter is not less than 4, it's 4 exactly. And so the loop ends, and so does the program. So basically what this is doing is giving our user 3 chances to give us input that's valid as far as the program is concerned. If they do it in those 3 chances, then we give them the appropriate answer and we end the program. If they don't do it within those 3 chances, then we're kind of giving it up for lost, and we just end the program anyway. If you want to give them more chances, you could bump this number up. If you put it at 11, then they're going to get 10 chances because the counter starts at 1. If the counter started at 0 and you set this to 3, then this number would be the exact number of chances that the user gets. But that can be a little confusing either way. So I just do it this way. But you could do it the other way if you wanted to. It's totally up to you. So let's run this version of the program and see what happens. I'm going to hit the button. Are you hungry? Yes? Okay, good. Are you hungry? No. Excellent. Are you hungry? Meh. You didn't really answer my question. Are you hungry? Woo. You didn't really answer my question. Are you hungry? Ack. You didn't really answer my question. End of the program. So that works. So let's see. Let's go ahead and do one more thing here. Add one more piece of functionality, and we'll talk about just some little helpful stuff, and then we'll wrap it up for today. Again, for anybody who wasn't here at the beginning, this is this is kind of a course. That doesn't mean you have to to participate in all 3 parts or anything, but we're going to build directly on this next week, same time, same place, with Hello World Part 2, and you can register for that on the CALS website, or you can catch it on Facebook or YouTube if you're watching there, or if you are interested in watching there. So definitely join me for that as well. And then Part 3 will be the following week. That'll be object-oriented code. Okay, in the chat, someone says, if the counter is set to 0, only gives the user 3 attempts. Shouldn't be, but let's see what happens. Counter equals 0. Do you have this set as 4 still? Or do you have that set as 3? it worked that way. Let's see. So yeah, if you were to set this at 0 and this at 3, then you'll give them 3 chances. If you do 1 and leave it as 4, then they'll get 3 chances. And you can bump it up a little more. Okay, cool. Oh, it was a question. I see. It sounded like you were saying that you set it to 0 and it only gave them 3 chances. So, okay. All right. I'm tracking with you now. No, that's a good question. Yeah. If it's set to 0 and this is set to 3, then it'll give them 3 chances. If it's set to 0 and 4, it'll give them 4 and so on. So yeah, no. Okay, cool. Sorry. I misunderstood there. That was a good clarification. Let's go ahead and do the last bit here, and we'll talk about a couple of little things that are helpful, and then we'll wrap it up for today. Oh, Anne Marie, you're welcome. I'm so glad. It's really interesting. Like, this is not something, writing code is not something I do professionally much, at least. Like, I have done it for work before, but it's not something I do on a day-to-day basis. It's really interesting to learn, and it really helps you think in computer, which is kind of useful nowadays for so many reasons. Cool. Let's see. So, okay, let's add our last bit of functionality to this version of the program. So here's what we're going to do. At the very top, I'm going to go to, I'm going to add one more little, or a couple more lines of blank space here. And then the new line 1 is going to be import random. That's all. And random is, I forget what they call it. There's specific terminology in Python. But in general, this kind of thing in a programming language is called a library. And a library is basically a set of additional functionality that you can choose to include inside of your program. Again, sort of preset stuff, tricks that Python already knows how to do, but it's not going to import, or it's not going to respond to those commands, essentially, if you don't import the library into your program. And the reason for that is all of that stuff has to be included inside of the program, all of those sort of definitions of the various functionality, and it makes the program bigger, in size on your computer. And so that is, and so you want to use this wisely, but it can be really helpful in certain situations. This random, maybe I have it in my notes what it's called. No, I don't. Okay. Anyway, this random library, or whatever you call it in Python, is I think they actually call it a module. So the random module in Python, what it does is it adds additional functionality that you can use that's related to randomness, which we'll see here in a moment. Then I'm going to come down here underneath the counter equals 1. I'm going to add another line here, and I'm going to set up another variable called foods. So I'll just write the word foods, hit my equal sign. And then after the equal sign, I'm going to use a set of square brackets. So I'm going to go square bracket. So this is on my keyboard, the left square bracket is right next to the P key. P is in Paul, and it fills in the right square bracket for me. Inside of the square brackets, I'm going to open a set of single quotes, and inside of that, I'll write a sandwich. And then outside of the single quotes, I'll put a comma. And then another set of single quotes inside of that, I'm going to write some vegetables. I'll move outside of the single quotes and put another comma. And then finally, in a third set of single quotes, a few chips, like so. Okay, so we've got it. Foods equal sign, and then in square brackets, we have a text string that's a sandwich inside of single quotes, a comma. Make sure the commas are black. That'll tell you they're outside of the single quotes there. Then you'll have some vegetables, comma, and then a few chips, like so. So that will, so that gives us the, so this creates what's called a list in Python, which is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. Rather than putting one value in our variable, like a string of text or a number, instead, we're putting a set of values into our variable. So all three of these text strings, a sandwich, some vegetables, and a few chips, are stored inside of this single variable foods. And there's a way to, if you wanted to refer to a specific value inside of it, you can do that with square brackets next to and a number next to the name of the variable. But we're not going to do that this time. We'll probably get into that next week, I would imagine. But for now, we've got this variable foods, and it stores these three strings of text. So what we're going to do is in the yes answer, so before we've said lunchtime will be here before you know it, we're going to replace this yes answer. So I'm going to get rid of all of that. Instead of lunchtime will be here before you know it, we're going to have a string of text in here, comma, have, and then a space. Make sure you put that space inside of the single quotes in the print function here. So here, comma, have, space, and then your apostrophe to end the text string. Then I'm going to put a plus sign to concatenate. Once again, put some text next to some other text. And then this time, instead of a regular text string or just the name of a variable, I'm going to do this: random dot choice. And then inside of another set of parentheses here, I'm going to put foods, the foods variable up here. Then in between these two right parentheses, I'm going to put plus, and then inside of single quotes, an exclamation point, just to properly punctuate our sentence. So we have here, comma, have, space, and then random.choice, foods, and then we add on an exclamation point afterwards. So let's see what it does, and then we'll talk about it. I'll hit the play button. Are you hungry? We know our no and everything else works. Let's just go straight to yes. Here, have a sandwich. Here, have some vegetables. Here, have a sandwich again. Here, have a few chips, and so on. It is random, so you might get the same thing twice in a row. That's fine. But what this is doing is it's going to that random module. What I'm saying when I put random dot, I'm saying, look at that random module that I brought in here. And there's a particular function inside of that, just like the print function or the input function. There's a particular function inside of that called choice. And then with that, I'm giving it as an argument my variable up here, foods. And what it's going to do is take a look at this stuff here and pick an option and fill it right in the text string. So that's pretty much it. That's the main stuff. The one other thing I wanted to show you actually though is kind of important. So we'll talk about it just briefly. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here, actually next to, in between counter, setting up the counter and setting up foods. And I'm going to just add a little hash mark right here. So Shift 3 on your keyboard. I'll add a little hash mark and then I'll say foods contains a list that Python can choose from giving the user food. Nice. You'll notice this all shows up in green. So what that is this is called a comment. It's really useful because when you write code, you're not writing in English. And it sometimes is hard, particularly if you come back after a night's sleep or after a month or after a couple of years, or if you're working with someone else and they are coming into it. Sometimes it's difficult to figure out exactly what the program is doing. Even if you know the programming language, you've got to sit there and really think it out if the code is not commented. But if you add these little comments here, they can jog your memory if you're coming back to it later on. Or they can, or later on, they can come back and, or later on, they can add some additional, or if you're working with someone else, they can, it will help them get up to speed on what the code does quickly. So that way they can dive into actually continuing the work with you. All right, and that really is about it. What questions do y'all have for me before we wrap it up for today? Oh, okay. Someone says for foods, how to make it a sandwich. What did I miss? So in the, in this list right here, we have a sandwich, some vegetables, and a few chips. So you just basically put in, so you put all of that in each one of those in a separate set of single quotes, separated by commas inside of the square brackets. So you've got square bracket, a sandwich in single quotes, comma, some vegetables in single quotes, comma, a few chips in single quotes, and then the square bracket. When you write that out, then this random.choice foods down here will just choose randomly one of the options to insert in the sentence. Here have exclamation point. And so if I run it several times, here have some vegetables, here have some vegetables, here have some vegetables. It is random. And sometimes it'll give you the same thing a lot. Wow, okay, it's really just doing it. Here have a sandwich. Here have a few chips. There we go. Yeah. Okay, cool, great. Any other questions before we wrap it up? So glad everybody enjoyed it. Thank you so much for coming, and hopefully I'll see you again next week. Same time, same place. And if you want to go back and refresh your memory at some point during the week, we're live streaming on Facebook and YouTube, so you can head to the CAL's YouTube channel. The best way to easiest way to get there, at least, is by going to cals.link/YouTube. And, you can subscribe and stuff. And then hopefully I will see y'all then. If you have a question in the meantime, you can also email me. The best email address to use is digital@cals.org. Thank y'all so much for coming. Have a great rest of the day. Bye.